Welcome to Asia Times TV, the home of cutting-edge news and analysis on events in Asia-Pacific region which impact the U.S. here at home and globally around the world. This is a region that will be central to the U.S. in the coming decades, both economically and geopolitically. President Obama, Secretary Clinton said as much during their recent visit to Hawaii, Australia, and Indonesia during the APEC meeting and in the ASEAN meeting. Some of the policymakers are calling the 21st century America's Pacific century. Will the 21st century be America's Pacific century? So this is a question we're going to take up today. We have with us a guest who's worldly and very well traveled, who's a member of the Democrats Abroad, vice chair of the Democrats Abroad International. She's a film producer, independent film producer, IT project manager. Her name is Vicki Hansen. She's visiting us from Luxembourg. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So let's begin at the beginning, right? So you're producing international films from Luxembourg.
That's right.
How is that possible?
Yeah, you didn't know Luxembourg's the belly button of the world?
I didn't know that. Well, I just went there for the first time, right, during the book tour, which the Democrats Abroad hosted for me on the Obama book, Barack Obama in Hawaii and Indonesia. So I was very happy, obviously, to travel to Luxembourg and learn more about it. And I was astounded by the 5 million, I guess, expats, Americans that are overseas who are actively involved in politics in the United States.
In Luxembourg, of course, we're a far smaller number of Americans who are living in Luxembourg. But it's a well-known place. We have the U.S. cemetery there from World War II. In fact, the street I live on is called General Patton.
Oh, wow.
Luxembourg has a very close relationship with the U.S.
Right.
But with regards to film and how that happens, I actually work with a company out in Los Angeles. I work with a company in Luxembourg, and I also work with a company out in India. So we like to think we span between,
right.
And it's a great place to span from, the heart of Europe.
Right, right. So clearly Bollywood is now a global phenomenon, right? And you in many ways represent that in terms of what you're trying to do professionally.
I don't know, Dinesh, if I'd actually say that, because I actually work with independent filmmakers in India.
Okay.
So we're not the typical Bollywood group.
Okay.
Saying that, I love dancing, and I've been known to dance on a mountaintop even when I was young. So I'm all for the Bollywood, 5-dance sequence and all of that.
My Fair Lady and all that.
Yeah, oh, fantastic. I love musicals as well.
Right.
However, I actually got involved with cinema out in India through one of the actors in Slumdog Millionaire.
And who was that?
That was Arfi Lamba, was his name.
And remind me again, what was the role that he played in the movie?
A very small role in the second part, called Barfi.
Oh, okay.
And but it was a very small role. But he was at the Cannes Film Festival,
right? And
I met him in 2010, and we found out we shared a birthday,
right?
Not the year.
And what is that?
April 2nd.
Oh, okay.
And he said he was a passionate tarot card reader. So
wow.
I asked him to read my tarot, and we just hit off a friendship at that stage, and I got involved in Indian cinema.
I see. So you were so Slumdog obviously was quite a phenomenal film. So let's just talk about Slumdog for a second. It's the first kind of breakaway film, right, that crossed over from South Asia, right? Of course, Crouching Tiger had already done that for the Hong Kong film industry, right? Mm-hmm. But Indian films had tried many, many times before, Lagan and others, with big stars and big casts, but hadn't succeeded. Slumdog obviously succeeds, partly because of the Western production, right? It was an English production.
I think it was, it was to go straight to video in the United States.
Right.
It was when it won the British Independent Film Awards, BIFA, that it got became known, and it got its theatrical release here, which helped it go on to win an Academy Award here.
Right.
But yeah, so it certainly was a phenomenal. I can't claim to be any expert or any way related with that fantastic film.
Right.
We all admire, of course.
Well, in my book on Barack Obama, President Obama, Barack Obama in Hawaii and Indonesia, I opened the book. I don't know, you have a copy of the book. I don't know if you read it, but you've had a chance to read it because you've been traveling all over the world. But I opened the book with the Academy Award win, which happens a few months after the inaugural. And a lot of the press in the US had made the linkage between the Obama win and this small, production, Slumdog winning the best prize. And of course, the story is about a guy who comes from nowhere and manages to win the prize. In fact, I think Frank Rich said in the New York Times that there was a synergy between the two events, the inaugural and the movie, which is about, narrative in some ways about globalization, how Mumbai is kind of the center of the capital world or something,
right.
Financial capital and so on and so forth, and movie world as well. And so, did you see any kind of a synergy between kind of what was happening in America and this movie, which you were kind of part of?
I think that the independent indie films, there's always been an aspect of that in the U.S. And I would say, for me, Barack Obama is very much about having honest conversations. It's not so much about a guy coming from nowhere. In fact, he went to a fantastic university.
Right.
He had a fantastic mother who's from the Midwest, which obviously I'm also from the Midwest, so rather partial to.
Oh, I'm a big fan of his mother.
And I've also been out to Kenya, to where his father was from, out by Lake Victoria.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say, he's an incredibly well-educated, intelligent man with a lot of integrity.
Oh, absolutely.
So for me, Barack Obama phenomenal is very much about having tough, honest conversations.
Right.
And a lot of people don't like this word, but transparency.
No, I think that's absolutely true. But it's also the case that he's the first president America has elected in the 232 years history of this country, who's from Hawaii, first Pacific president, whose father was from Kenya, like you said, mother from the Midwest, and who's really the first biracial president, the first president who is multicultural when you look at Western democracies. And because he really comes from a set of islands, he grows up on a set of islands, Indonesia and Hawaii, for the most part, 18, 20 years of his life. It's not that it's nowhere, it's just that it's not Ohio or Iowa, where you were born and raised. So.
A place like Iowa, we used to be known for having the most college graduates of any place in the U.S.
Right.
And I think that there is that, he has a real respect for education that is great to see in a president. And that's something that also rings true out in Iowa, I must say. And of course, he got his start in Iowa,
Right, of course.
He won after that great debate that he did
at the
in
caucuses,
Iowa. Yeah.
Right.
So.
And now we're going through the primaries all over again, so we're revisiting Iowa.
We are. We just actually set up a new Facebook group called Iowans Abroad.
Excellent.
And we had a lot of interesting conversation going on there. And in fact, we're doing one for every state across the U.S. So we have New Jerseyites abroad.
Right.
Which is getting going as well.
So let's talk, I know we've touched on the film, so let's talk about the Democrats Abroad organization, which is, again, you said 5 million or more expats who are living overseas, who are active, who pay taxes, who are quite involved with local politics, and have turned elections.
The 5 million number, in fact, I think it's closer, it's more like 6 million, is the number who live abroad. And about 1 million of those are in the military. Now, it's a subset of those that are active in politics, but absolutely every adult American who has a U.S. passport has the right to vote in U.S. elections. Just like we have the right to pay taxes forever, we have the right to vote. And that's an important, not everyone's even aware of that right that they have. And it's also what's very special about this year, 2012, is there's something called the MOVE Act that was passed. And that means that every American who lives abroad must actually re-request their ballot. They must re-register to vote in every year of an election. That's new. So even if they all got their ballots automatically from their state in the past, that won't necessarily happen in 2012. And everyone must re-register. And so we have a special website to help that happen called www.votefromabroad.org.
Okay, so this is clearly first in terms of electoral sort of history, if you will, in the United States, where global Americans who are international, living abroad, married to spouses, let's say, who are in Europe or have kids who are being raised in Europe. And that's clearly one of the sentiments that I got when I did the book tour with Democrats Abroad. A lot of people approached me basically because they resonated to the Obama narrative,
Right.
the early childhood narrative where he grew up really in Indonesia and in the Pacific with an American mom, but with an Indonesian stepfather, and a lot of members of Democrats Abroad could relate to that narrative
That's
powerfully.
right. Yes, absolutely. I think we're all quite happy with Obama and how he presents the United States for those of us that live abroad. We're very proud. We tend to, I always say I'm kind of like an old-fashioned American. You often say that expats are even more of their nation than those in their nation are. So an Irish person in New York might be more Irish almost than an Irish person in Ireland. And I think that sometimes Americans abroad are almost more American than those here at home.
Fascinating.
So yeah, he's certainly, our membership in Democrats Abroad grew by 1/3
Right.
in 2008.
And so did the American approval ratings, across
Right.
the board when he became president, certainly in Europe and in Africa and Asia. America's image kind of got a total makeover, if you will, overnight. Of course, now that's being debated. It's, of course, it's going to get more political as we get into the election season, and Romney, of course, making the claims that that Obama is apologizing for America, and so on and so forth. Of course, you disagree with that. I totally,
Yeah,
I can see that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know our president is very proud American. Yeah, and he represents us very well.
Right.
Yeah,
Excellent.
and we certainly feel that abroad.
So now shifting again back to to your movie kind of interest, professional interest in this case. So again, how do you link Obama with the kind of professional work that you're doing in terms of international film?
I don't actually,
Oh, you don't?
frankly. No,
Okay.
not particularly. I mean, I was involved in a video done in 2008 where it was called Yes, We Spanned. It was the brainchild of a lady from Meredith Wheeler out in Toulouse, France. And her idea was to play on the Yes, We Can, and it was called Yes, We Span. And photos were taken in countries across the world of Americans on bridges that supported Obama. And that was put together as a video, and I helped get that scene. So that was kind of an independent little project.
So this was created during the 2008
That
campaign?
was created during the 2008. We also had a very professional video done with Gwyneth Paltrow, asking where in the world you'll vote, and we'll be updating that again this year.
So we have a clip of that, if we can see that quickly.
People think they can't.
They think it's a very difficult process.
People say it's too complicated. It's not.
It's not.
It's very, very easy.
Yeah, it's too complicated to use your computer.
Well, it's not.
It's not.
I heard people say that they didn't have the right to vote.
From abroad.
A vote is a vote, regardless of where you are.
For anyone who says that they don't have the right to vote, you do.
You do?
I've heard people say, I thought my mother would sort it out for me.
I wish my mom would take care of me too.
Start now, right now,
If you're a U.S. citizen
You can vote from wherever you are.
from anywhere.
Luxor, Egypt,
In Shanghai,
Dubai,
Timbuktu,
Rio de Janeiro,
Tokyo,
Ouagadougou,
Berlin,
Johannesburg,
Siberia,
Buenos Aires.
in Canada. I'll be voting, which is not America.
I'll be voting from London, but you can vote from anywhere.
I'll be voting from Germany.
I'll be voting from Paris, France.
Me too.
Me too.
You can be heard.
On election day.
Millions of Americans.
Millions.
Of U.S. citizens.
Just like me. Me. Me.
Me.
Me.
Me.
Live abroad.
Our overseas,
All around the world.
You've got to do it.
It will make all the difference in the world.
in 2 minutes flat.
Request a ballot.
Do it now.
Do it today.
It's urgent. What happens at home
Affects us all.
I'm 18.
I'm 19.
We're both voting for the first time.
I feel like I was born a Democrat.
My vote will count. Your vote will count.
Every single vote will count.
In this election.
You can't let this moment slip away.
Just go and vote.
Where on earth will you vote?
Votefromabroad.org.
Absentee ballots for Americans.
I'm voting Democrat.
We have another fantastic video from one of our members, Jake Lamar in Paris, talking about "I'm not disappointed" and about the president. And,
Right, and
what
where
have
is, I think we have a clip of that as well, right? Jake Lamar, he's part of the Democrats Abroad France,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
Okay.
Over the past couple of years, I've begun to feel more and more like a voice in the wilderness when talking with my fellow left-wing Democrats. I'm that little voice saying, I'm not disappointed. I do not feel disappointed by President Obama. I'm not disappointed by a president who signed the most important piece of social legislation in 45 years, providing health care coverage to 30 million Americans in need of it. I'm not disappointed by a president who eliminated a terrorist who had tormented the American psyche for 10 years. I'm not disappointed by a president who, while disrupting al-Qaeda, has transformed U.S. relations with the Muslim and Arab worlds. In revolutions from Tunisia to Egypt, from Libya to Syria, I haven't seen a single image of an American flag being burned. That would have been unimaginable before 2009. I'm not disappointed by a president who has named 2 women, including a wise Latina, to the Supreme Court. I'm not disappointed by a president who did away with the twisted don't ask, don't tell policy in the military. I am not disappointed by a president who has tried to maintain civility with a hostile political opposition, a president who has maintained the dignity of the office and sought constructive compromise.
All right, very interesting clip again. So the movie that you're promoting now, you're in New York, and I think you're also promoting the movie in India, you said, is called Putran.
That's right.
Which
Son.
means the sun, S-U-S-O-N.
That's right.
So tell us about this movie, which has already been screened, I guess, in Luxembourg.
It's actually been screened at the Chennai International Film Festival,
Right.
where it got a very good reports on it.
But the ambassador in Luxembourg asked you to
The honorary
review
council,
the movie.
that's
yeah.
right, the honorary council from Luxembourg to India had approached me because this film needed finishing funds to get a theatrical release in India. And it's a film, it takes place down in the south of India in an area, Chennai, Tamil area, and it's about a son that goes missing, basically, from if you like, a middle-class family in India. And it's a little bit, it touches on the children in the workplace in India.
Right, so the movie is about child labor.
It
Right.
certainly touches on that, without wanting to give away
Right.
the story.
Right.
Yeah.
It does have a happy, kind of happy but sad ending in some ways.
It's a heart-wrenching
Right.
ending. Yeah,
Right.
it is. But it's a film where we came up with the idea that if we came up with 10 charities who each would donate some money towards getting a theatrical release for it, we would put those charities at the end of it. So we have one called Books for All, which is a charity for books for kids in India who sign on, and we have it in discussions with a couple other charities. And so it's a way, I think, to get those charities a little bit more noticed. They can do events with the film. We'll get a theatrical release in India. It's nice for the producer and the director to have that happen. And I think it's a worthwhile movie. You know, it's certainly a worthwhile movie to take your time to see.
Right, right, absolutely. It's a great cause. I think when I was introduced to the film and the clip, I was quite touched by the film and the narrative, and the story obviously is very powerful. And then you're also working on other indie projects.
That's right.
That are are they, I think, documentary-based or narrative film-based?
Yeah, they're feature film. One is with the writer-director Pierre Assouline, who's quite well known in France. He spends half his time out in Mumbai. We're just finishing some fundraising on that. It's interesting, if you make a film that bridges east-west, but plays in the west, but you produce it out in India, it can be interesting economically, as well as for the cinema goer, you know, just in terms. And we have a story called Road to My Indian Heart. It's about it's kind of like a version of an Eat, Pray, Love, but about a male model who leaves London to go back to India to find his birth mother after a fashion designer friend of his has committed suicide. And it's a story where he falls in love with an older lady.
Again, you don't want to give away too much of the story
no,
here.
No, but it's a beautiful story in a city of 5,000 temples.
Oh, okay.
Not a lot of hot, steamy sex,
Right.
but there's a lot of beautiful introduction to spirituality in India.
Well, I'm looking forward to that script without getting too hot and steamy. So I think it's a perfect example, in a way, and a segue to where we started, which is how globalization, in some ways, is changing our world. You can see this in film, and certainly the funding for films now, for Indian productions, is increasingly overseas, as in some ways outsourcing is pushing some of the production and the jobs to other parts of the world. Have you experienced that as well in your filmmaking?
Well, in filmmaking, with regards to funding, you go where the money is.
Right.
So, of course, India has more billionaires, probably in Mumbai, concentrated than there are in a lot of places. So it's an interesting place for funding.
Okay.
And because of the low production cost, it's an interesting place to make movies. It's also, I believe, it is in today's world that a filmmaker in America has more in common with a filmmaker in India than perhaps they would have with a farmer in Iowa or something. And a farmer in India will have more in common with a farmer in Iowa. What brings us closest is almost our profession now, rather than the country we're in. So
Iowa now is the bellwether for the United States and the world in some ways. This is the point that you're making, right? Because Iowa really made Obama possible.
It did.
Iowa is really going to, I think by 8 votes, put Romney ahead, the Republican.
By 8 votes, and after all the money he spent, that's what he managed to get.
Right.
It's interesting. And Santorium just behind, and Ron Paul, not a bad showing.
Right.
But I think the ground organization for Obama and the turnout for Obama on that caucus night was actually larger than the Republican caucus.
Fantastic.
Which I think will show.
Were you there? Were you there?
I wasn't out in Iowa. I'm going out next week.
Oh, okay.
But I wasn't out during that. I was back in Luxembourg.
Fantastic. So, I think Obama, as I argue in the book, in many ways represents our first global president. And Douglas Brinkley, the presidential historian, has said as much that in a couple of interviews that he's given. And in many ways, I think the Obama narrative and the election in 2008 and the excitement that it created around the world, because his polls were off the chart when he got elected in 07 and 08 by BBC, The Economist, and other newspapers that took a poll. Except for like a few handful of countries, his ratings were like in 80–90%.
That's right.
And they continue to remain very high around the world, contrary to what his detractors might say. So clearly, a case can be made that Obama is, not only the first African American president, clearly he is, but the first global president, the first multicultural president that the United States has elected in 200+ years of the history of the country. And in some ways, I think your filmmaking career reflects that.
I like to draw the parallel that
and they're joined at the hip in that respect, in the sense that you don't see it that way, but I'm just saying that possibly your interest in global film and international film is mirrored in some ways in your interest in Obama as a global president.
Yeah. I would like to make films that make a difference, that open perspectives, that bring to the heartland of the U.S. how the rest of the world looks at certain issues, and vice versa. And in the same way with Democrats abroad, we make the difference as well. In close elections, the overseas vote is counted. So we can say Al Franken would not be senator except for that overseas vote. Same for John Tester, Jim Webb, Loretta Sanchez. All those, that overseas vote is important. And our overseas vote as well, we do tend to be maybe a little more liberal than some of our counterparts in the U.S.
Because Europe is in some ways more left of center.
And you know, I live in a country that has single-payer health care.
Right.
And our doctors still drive Porsches, you know.
Okay, wow.
So we know it can work.
We have to replicate that here in the United States. Single pair and Porsches. Yeah, we have to have
maybe Porsches built in the U.S.
That's right. That's right. There you go. Right, because industries don't know boundaries now, because you can set up plants anywhere. So fantastic. So on that note, it was a pleasure having you here. Thanks for sharing with us about your interest in U.S. politics from the perspective of Democrats abroad, as well as your international filmmaking and world traveling that you're undertaking as part of filmmaking, which is quite interesting and fascinating. And of course, it ties up with Asia in the sense that you're making films in India and other parts of Asia and telling stories that have not been told before.
And it was out in Seoul, Korea, where I was voted international vice chair.
There you go.
So it all started there.
It's a much smaller world. And with that, we will wrap up this show. Thank you very much.